Welcome to a new episode of Diversity Matters, a fireside chat series hosted by the PRCA's Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Committee. I'm Dominique Nelson, committee member of the PRCA Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Committee, and we have with us today Bernice Lim, founder and principal psychologist at Asia Psychology Center. Thank you for joining us, Bernice.
Hi, thanks for having me, Dom.
Great to have you on. So, despite today's ever-growing diverse global workforce, equality, diversity and inclusion strategies are still lacking amongst Asia's workplaces. The Asia-Pacific region continues to experience traditional forms of discrimination, such as those based on gender, race, and age, as well as other factors such as educational background. According to a survey conducted by Milieu Insight and Aware last year, 1 in 2 people in Singapore has experienced workplace discrimination, with 18% having been disadvantaged by company policies due to characteristics such as race, religion, gender, and disability. This is extremely concerning as the impacts of discrimination can leave lifelong tolls on individuals, which leads us to today's discussion. So getting right into the heart of it, Bernice, is there a link between mental health and discrimination? And if so, can you speak a bit more on it?
Okay, so for many adults, right, dealing with discrimination can result in a state of heightened awareness and vigilance towards the environment around them. And obviously, as you can imagine, this can definitely trigger stress responses, and even this anticipation of discrimination that is sufficient enough to actually cause distress in people. So if you're really used to a culture of discrimination in a team, for example, then you're going to come to expect it, and you're going to come to anticipate and then dread it. And then, okay, so if you don't get like a promotion, or if you're left to wonder whether it had anything to do with your performance, so you're constantly second guessing yourself, right? Or whether it's anything to do with a certain demographic you belong to, then in the long run, if you think about this, if you're systematically subjected to this kind of unfair treatment, it will be difficult, and you might also feel demoralized, because no amount of hard work and talent will lead to a fair and commensurate reward. So this will obviously have an impact on your mental health.
Oh no, dear. And that's that's a serious issue. And I guess that leads me to my next question. If you have this anticipatory dread and it's something you experience on a day-to-day basis, sometimes you might not even realize that you're being discriminated. You can hear maybe these hurtful comments, but you just might pass them off as, oh, that was just a joke. And that leads us to the next question. How can individuals actually realize that they are being discriminated instead of, oh, that's just a passing comment or just a joke?
Okay, so this doesn't mean that we now go ahead to be like hyper vigilant and then overthink every single comment that our colleagues pass, right? Then that's like shooting ourselves in the foot, because it's about mental health and how to deal with it, right? I think it's more being more mindful about whether you do feel or experience discomfort when certain comments are passed, or when you're interacting with some individuals. So instead of like brushing things aside, sit with, easier said than done, of course, but sit with these feelings and then see if you see whether you might be able to identify some sort of like pattern. So for example, think about whether you might feel uncomfortable every time you head to a meeting with a certain group of people, or if you feel uncomfortable, reading certain comments or getting asked certain questions, or on different communication platforms. Or do you feel like maybe you haven't been treated fairly or given due credit for the things that you have accomplished, or maybe you feel like you received different opportunities as compared to other people on your team? So I think it's again, more easy said than done, but try not to gaslight yourself or trivialize what you might be feeling.
Yeah. And I guess, we've all heard of imposter syndrome, right? Individuals who self-doubt their accomplishments, and actually studies have also shown that women suffer this on a larger scale than men. And to some extent, this could actually deter individuals from identifying discrimination. right? I mean, could you speak a bit more to that in imposter syndrome?
Okay, so just to ensure that we're all on the same page, imposter syndrome is, in a nutshell, is when someone, not just women. So when an individual experiences self-doubt in their skills, their abilities, talent, and they consistently feel like they are not deserving of their accomplishments or their titles, and this is how the term imposter syndrome came about, right? So these people feel like they are imposters and they're terrified of being exposed as frauds. And so if you think about that, so this is about self-worth, right? The individual with imposter syndrome, they struggle very much with self-worth, and since individuals like that have problems believing in their own strengths and their own right to be given like credit or equal opportunities, then of course it's going to be more difficult to identify when like a discriminatory remark was passed, or identify when certain treatment is discriminatory. So those with imposter syndrome might come to, I think, accept the unfair treatment, since they this might echo what they have in their heads, right? So for example, you might say something like, "Oh, I think it's only fair that Jim got the promotion because he's really more talented in this area. There must be a reason why I got passed over. I think it must have been this project, that project that I didn't do well enough. It might be this conversation that wasn't as smooth." So you start to kind of make excuses in your head about why you didn't get a certain treatment. Yeah. So you start to also give excuses for others' behavior as well. And when you automatically attribute others' treatment of you as a me thing, or because I didn't do a good enough job, then this is like a pretty good chance, it's a pretty good indicator that you have blind spots against yourself.
So again, it's catching yourself at that internalized gaslighting stage, right?
And this is difficult sometimes, because if this is something that you're very used to since you were very young, it might be difficult to spot as a not so healthy pattern, especially if, for example, also you may be surrounded by people who are more critical of you than they should be. Then it's going to be very difficult to differentiate when these comments are constructive and when these comments are unfair.
Yeah. And you could just be trapped in that cycle of, is it a me thing or is it something else, right?
And because it's so tiring, I think that you might just get resigned that, they're just better than me. Or even if you do know that actually this is starting to feel really unfair, if you experience this everywhere you go, and in every system there are flaws, right? Then you're just going to be not motivated anymore to work to your potential, what I mean? And that's the tragedy, right?
Yeah, that's very well said. And yeah, the tragedy of being in that system continuously. And I guess that's a very good segue into the next question, which would be, in this case, in this situation, what are some steps that individuals can take to safeguard their mental health, or ensure that they can pick out discriminatory, safeguard themselves against discriminatory actions, basically?
Okay, so again, easier said than done, because some of these beliefs are really ingrained, and and these self-limiting beliefs are ingrained, right? But I think it's important to create or try to start creating a psychological distance between you and the problem. So instead of taking things very personally, like, yeah, I realized that I didn't do a good enough job. I think I didn't do a good enough job. That's why I got passed over. So instead of thinking like this, start to kind of view things in a more objective perspective as actually, I should have gotten this, or I should have been treated like this, because I can see a very clear pattern in how there's a difference in how I'm treated, versus how someone else is treated. So instead of allowing easier said than done, but instead of allowing this discriminatory treatment slowly erode your self-image, in that, yes, yeah, I know I'm not good enough. Yes, yeah, I got passed. That opportunity got passed to Jim again. I know I'm not good enough for this. So this is a constant erosion, right? So instead of allowing these unfair treatments to erode your self-image. Recognize that it's a systemic problem that you may or may not have control over. Thus, it's not you. So you could be I say this sometimes, right, to my patients. You can be the juiciest peach in the world, and there will still be people who don't like peaches. So it's not a you thing. It's a systemic thing, or maybe it's a them thing. And I think this is the important part as well. Information is king, right? Information serves to inform, and information serves to empower. I think it's important to arm yourself with information, like how can I seek grievance when or seek recourse? Do I have access to my skip levels? If, for example, you feel like your boss is not very fair to you, do you have access to your skip levels? What are the company's protocols in terms of whistleblowing? And do remember, this is just information gathering. We haven't even gone through the pulling the trigger part where you set some things in motion. So this is just information gathering to survey your options. So think about who you trust to be able to speak to about this, or whether there are external parties that you might be able to reach out to give you information.
That's a very good point. Very good point. And I also wanted to ask, so from an industry perspective, the comms industry is one that, we have a lot of client-facing interactions, and the client may not have a good day. There's bad days, right? In terms of, facing client-facing stress, yes. So a lot of stress from the client. How can comms professionals arm themselves mentally to face this kind of stress?
So I'll put forth a statement that might be contentious, but I really believe that the customer is not always right. So the client is not always right. It's my personal belief, and I think that this would resonate with many people in the front-facing industry, right? That this is a very, very detrimental motto for any team to follow. And I think that this would, in the moderate to long run, drive up team resentment, and it will probably diminish team morale as well. And I think that sometimes leaders need to step in when customers or clients go out of line. And the training for teams is not just about how to handle difficult customers, right? I think the training is also needed to how to give gentle, assertive pushback. Because sometimes I think that taking ownership for mistakes or that the business or the team should not be accountable for, this can lead to even more unrealistic demands to the team. And giving in may or may not always appease the client, and make the problem go away. It might just continue draining the team's resources further. And this is why I think it's a vicious cycle. And we should not take a myopic stance on this. Like, okay, now we'll just give in to the client's demands. We'll just make the problem go away. No, I do believe that this is a very myopic strategy. It works in the short run, maybe not also, but it does not work in the long run. So I do think that also with the lucky girl syndrome. I don't know whether you guys have heard of it. Like the lucky or the manifestation. So I do think that like all the more then we should not contribute to the culture of it's veering towards toxic positivity already. You don't have to be upbeat all the time just because you're in PR and comms or that you're front facing. While obviously there's a certain professional front that needs to be you still need to put up, right? I think we need to protect each other by encouraging authenticity. So if you feel crappy, you just feel crappy, period.
Wow, Bernice, I can hear like comms people across the world cheering for you and cheering for that answer. Oh,
it's not just for comms, right? It's really anyone in the human facing industry. I think that this would resonate with anyone who needs to deal with human beings. And if you need to handle stakeholders, manage up, manage down, I think this would resonate with anyone with whose job scope, part of their job scope requires that.
Yes. And, while you can be client facing, you can't always put up that front, right? You have to be authentic. And it helps that, at the end of the day, maybe you can go back to your team and let that front down and be like, hey, I just had a really hard day. Right?
Absolutely. So you have like it's like your tribe, right? So
Yeah.
yes, let's go out to war together. Let's clinch this deal, or let's somehow placate this very difficult customer. But coming back to the office, let's keep it real. It was a very difficult day. We don't always have to to be very PR all the time. It's okay. We don't have to be, especially when it's safe to be.
I love that answer. That's wonderful. Yes, love it. Okay, so I guess moving to the next question. When we look at DI, and who fits under this box, we can't only focus on demographics like age and race and gender. We also have to keep in mind that people with mental health issues are in this box as well. So from that perspective, what can employers or organizations do to create a more inclusive environment for people who face mental health challenges?
As a hiring manager, as a people manager, I think that we'll need to accept that the team is not going to be homogeneous, not in terms of skill sets, competence, motivation, etc. But that doesn't mean that anyone is going to contribute less because of this difference. And I think that having this narrative is important to inculcate in the team. So I think we should all support each other when we see someone who needs it, and we should take turns being the support and receiving the support. And this is how, team camaraderie is built, right? So no one feels like they are just trudging on, forward alone, right? So when you feel like it's okay to sound out the alarm that, hey, I'm not doing so well right now, can I have a bit more support in this? And then after that, being able to identify, oh, actually, Mandy isn't doing so well right now. Hey, let's maybe take this off her plate for her. Maybe let's just tell her to go for like a 3-day break, and no one's going to disturb her. So I think it's inculcating this kind of culture. I think this would really be helpful to combat burnout also. And I've said this many times. I'm an advocate for it also. I think we need to normalize talk about going for therapy. So and I hear this very often from some of my patients. While there's a lot more spotlight in mental health awareness, taking care of your mental health, I still think that there's a very big stigma in Singapore, about going for therapy. So I think that if companies walk the talk, not just talk about, oh yeah, you guys need to get help. So if companies are able to walk the talk, like for example, set aside resources for mental health and self-care, whether this is in form of time off or benefits like a stipend for therapy, I think that would strengthen the narrative that it's really okay to seek help. It's really okay if you need to take a mental health day off. And I think that team managers, employers could also look at work allocation from the point of mental capacity, not just, oh, this person's great at this, so I'm just going to dump this on this person. Oh, this person's plate seems a bit more empty, the funnel should go there. Well, obviously that we can't escape from that. That will always be the case. But I think that you also need to think of how this person might be doing in terms of mental capacity. And we really should not assume that everyone has the same mental capacity. Also, just because someone has been able to do it from before doesn't mean that this person is going to do it again and again and again. So I think that taking time out to check in with team members a bit more, so that like rates of burnout can be spotted and addressed quickly. I think this is really important. And getting to know your team a bit better, checking in a bit more often. I mean, this is also going to help you be able to understand, like, oh, this person actually prefers these type of like projects because they're naturally quite good at it. So then it will help you organize and harness, right, their competencies a bit more. Then productivity will naturally also go up. So it's really a win-win.
I really like that answer. For clear communication between team, for sure, it's such a key important point that we need today. And I like your point on resource allocation from mental capacity. I think that was really interesting.
Because I just one more point, because I realized that it's easier to just allocate to the person that has been able to do the job most effectively or efficiently. I mean, it's like, oh, this person can do it. I just give to that person, right? So so that I minimize the error rate and everything. But here's the thing, right? This person might be chugging along at a really, really fast speed. That's not sustainable. So while this person can do it 2 or 3 or 4 times, it doesn't mean by the 6th time they won't break. And this is where that's where we talk about attrition, right? So that's why I think we need to check in with our team members a little bit more.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess on that note, it leads us to our second final question that we ask most of our interviewees. So the PRCA ED&I committee is working towards creating a charter for the industry across APAC. What is one thing you strongly believe should be captured in this charter?
Human capital. Yeah, so I think that human capital is the most precious and powerful asset that any organization has, right? So it makes sense to devote more resources and to protect and grow human capital. And we can do this by not seeing each employee as just another cog in a huge system of other cogs. I think it's important to view each employee as a valuable resource to harness and to grow. And I'm not sure if it's easy to see this all the time, but attrition is actually very costly. The cost of hiring, rehiring, onboarding, offboarding, and then having the team, adapt to the changing team dynamics because of attrition, disruption to workflow. All of this is extremely costly. So because of that, I think that we need to learn how to protect each employee like we would a very valuable asset, not something that's dispensable, like another cog.
Yeah, people are just not numbers, right? We are actual people with different mental capacities, different personalities, and you're right, it's not just numbers on a page. Okay, and that leads to our final question. So if there was one thing our listeners can take away from our conversation today, what would you like them to remember? Just one final point.
Maybe reflect on the privileges that you might have, by virtue of being in a certain demographic, who might not have the same privileges as you do. And this doesn't have to be contrived, right? You don't have to go out of your way for another colleague. But I really do believe that a little bit of kindness, freely given all around, it can actually make a huge difference to those around you.
I love that. That should be on a t-shirt, a little bit of kindness. So nice.
I'll patent that.
You should. And I guess that wraps up our conversation today. Thank you so much, Bernice, for being on. I loved our conversation. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. Okay.
Wonderful. And to everyone who is listening in, to our audience, we want to hear from you. Please do share your thoughts with us. You can email us, drop us a DM, or even just comment on this conversation, and we'll be more than happy to pick up on some of the things that you bring up in the future episodes as well. So feel free to also share this conversation with your friends and colleagues, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode.